This is Meghan Vitale, Principal Transportation Planner at the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council, or SMTC. Thanks for taking the time to learn about the SMTC and our long-range transportation plan. This presentation will provide an introduction to the SMTC and our function as an agency. I will also talk about the purpose of the 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan, the update process, and the elements of the 2021 amendment. At the end of the presentation, I'll provide contact information so that you can give us your feedback on the draft LRTP update. The next few slides provide an overview of the SMTC. The SMTC is a Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO. An MPO is a transportation policymaking and planning body made up of representatives of local, state, and federal government and transportation authorities. The MPO itself doesn't actually own any transportation facilities, but we provide a forum to bring together those entities that do run our transportation system. Every urban area in the United States with more than 50,000 people has an MPO. The Policy Committee is the designated MPO, and we'll see a list of those Policy Committee members in a few slides. The MPO is charged with the comprehensive, cooperative, and continuous transportation planning process for its metropolitan area. Our Metropolitan Planning Area, or MPA, includes all of Onondaga County, the town of Sullivan in Madison County, and the towns of West Monroe, Hastings, Schuylkill, and a small portion of the town of Granby in Oswego County. This is the area in which we conduct transportation planning studies and program federal capital transportation funds. Every MPO is made up of member agencies. Our member agencies are listed on this slide. These include local, county, state governments, and other entities that have a vested interest in our transportation system. Our staff, including our director, planners, and our analysts, take direction from the SMTC's member agencies. Every MPO is charged with comprehensive transportation planning. This means that we look at all modes of transportation, including transit, a road network, freight, walking, and bicycling within our metropolitan planning area. The transportation planning process is also required to be cooperative. This means that we coordinate with our federal, state, and local agencies to develop transportation plans and capital programs. And we provide an opportunity for citizens to participate in the transportation planning process. Transportation planning is also a continuous process, and this is represented in our three main products. Our regional transportation vision is articulated in our long-range transportation plan. We also maintain an annual work program of transportation planning studies. This is called our Unified Planning Work Program. Finally, we administer federal capital funding through our Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. The MPO process exists to examine the region's future and investment alternatives, facilitate collaboration of governments, other interested parties, and the public, and to prioritize transportation needs. This helps us invest funds appropriately to reflect the region's vision and balances our needs versus limited funding. The MPO process expresses the consensus of the community through member agencies and elected officials. The remainder of the presentation will discuss the proposed LRTP amendment. Our original 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan was adopted in September of 2015. That plan was our first entirely new plan with new goals and objectives since 1995, although updates have been published in between. The new 2050 LRTP emphasized performance-based planning and included a system performance report for our transportation system in accordance with the current federal legislation that guided the surface transportation program at that time. Federal regulations require that we update our LRTP every 5 years. The most recent rules for LRTPs come from the Fixing America's Surface Transportation, or FAST Act. Since the FAST Act was signed in December 2015, multiple federal rulemakings were issued that specified additional requirements for performance measures and the LRTP's system performance report. These additional requirements were reflected in the 2020 update, along with updated demographic and economic conditions, an update to our computer model, and an exploration of emerging trends in transportation. We are now considering an amendment to our LRTP that will consist of two documents, an addendum to the System Performance Report in Chapter 4 and a revised financial analysis in Chapter 6. No changes are proposed to the other chapters of the LRTP 2020 update with this current amendment. By law, our next required LRTP update would be due in 2025. However, we are amending the LRTP now to reflect progress on the I-81 Viaduct project over the past year. The New York State Department of Transportation released the I-81 Viaduct Project Draft Design Report / Draft Environmental Impact Statement to the public in July 2021 and identified the community grid as the preferred alternative. The LRTP 2020 update currently identifies the I-81 Viaduct project as a regionally significant project in Chapter 2 and as an illustrative project in the financial analysis of the plan. The individual projects associated with the I-81 Viaduct project community grid alternative will need to be added to the SMTC's capital program, the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, before federal funding can be programmed for the projects. However, the project needs to be reflected in the specific projects listings within the LRTP, not the illustrative projects, in order to be added to the TIP. The purpose statement for the LRTP remains unchanged, consistent with the original 2050 plan. The plan is to guide the SMTC's member agencies in making transportation investment decisions over the next 30 years that support the planning goals of the region and local communities, contribute to the achievement of system performance goals, and advance regionally significant infrastructure projects. The 4 regionally significant projects were identified in the original 2050 LRTP back in 2015 and remained in the 2020 update within Chapter 2. This section of the LRTP supports the ongoing DEIS process for I-81 to advance a solution that addresses the transportation needs within the priority area identified by the I-81 corridor study and the DEIS, and does not need to be amended. The other regionally significant projects also remain as they were reflected in the 2020 update. The amendment currently being considered for the LRTP consists of 2 documents. The first is an additional piece for the System Performance Report in Chapter 4, which would add the transit safety targets and the current highway safety targets that were adopted after the 2020 update to the LRTP was adopted. These targets and data can be found in the Chapter 4 Addendum document on our website. The second piece is a revised Chapter 6, which is the financial analysis for the plan. The proposed amendment places the I-81 Viaduct projects within the short and mid-term project lists with individual project costs and identifies additional revenues to support these projects. With those changes, the I-81 Viaduct project has been removed from the discussion of illustrative projects since it is now reflected earlier in the text in Chapter 6. The next few slides will discuss the financial analysis changes in more detail. Before we look at the list of projects within the LRTP, it is important to note that projects were divided into maintenance and non-maintenance. Maintenance includes any project that doesn't increase the capacity of the current transportation system. The 2020 update to the LRTP refined the category of maintenance to differentiate between major maintenance projects with a construction cost over $3 million and minor maintenance projects with lower construction costs. Major maintenance projects are now listed individually, while minor maintenance projects are grouped together by category to emphasize the importance of maintenance projects within our region. There are a lot of existing roads to pave and bridges to repair just to keep us moving within the current transportation network. The list of projects was recently updated for the 2020 LRTP update. For this amendment, we are adding the projects associated with the I-81 Viaduct. For the short term, the first 5 years of the plan, the list is consistent with the SMTC's current Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, which is our capital program plus the I-81 Viaduct Project. Table 6.2 in the LRTP Amendment lists all of these short-term projects, which total about $1.17 billion. This total includes 5 projects, highlighted here, that are associated with the I-81 Viaduct, and that together total $800 million. For the next 10 years of the plan, the midterm years of 2025 through 2034, we worked with our member agencies to develop an anticipated list of projects, including elements of the I-81 Viaduct project, that are expected to occur within this timeframe. The midterm projects total about $1.83 billion, with $1.1 billion of that total for the I-81 Viaduct project. Inclusion in the financial analysis of the LRTP does not guarantee that a project will be funded. Each project must still eventually compete for federal funding through the SMTC's TIP process. But the list in the LRTP articulates a vision for the future based on the information we have available right now. Projects selected for inclusion on future TIPs will be evaluated based on the LRTP goals and objectives and weighed against the other projects proposed during that TIP update cycle. In the long-term timeframe of the LRTP, from 2035 until 2050, the primary focus is on maintenance. Cost projections were based on midterm costs by category, with 10% allocated for non-maintenance projects. The LRTP amendment does not propose any changes to the long-term project costs, so what is shown here is consistent with the 2020 update. The chart here shows total anticipated spending by project category over the 30 years of the LRTP. The total project cost is expected to be over $5 billion with the inclusion of the I-81 Viaduct project. Highway and bridge maintenance costs make up 42% of the anticipated future project costs, and transit maintenance makes up another 13%. The remaining 45% of total anticipated project costs are expected to be non-maintenance projects, with most of that amount dedicated to the I-81 Viaduct project. One of the federal requirements for the LRTP is that the plan must show fiscal constraint. This means that we have to show that we can reasonably expect to fund the projects listed in the plan over the time frame of the plan. The LRTP cannot be a wish list. It must be grounded in fiscal reality. This LRTP amendment includes the expectation of nearly $5.2 billion in revenue for transit and highway projects in our planning area through the year 2050. This includes about $800 million in federal highway funding, including local matching funds, for the I-81 Viaduct project. Although this analysis shows a surplus of about $28.88 million, that figure represents less than 1% of the total revenues that we expect to have available for transportation projects through 2050. So really, that is a fairly tight margin. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about the SMTC and our LRTP amendment. You can download the Chapter 4 Addendum and the revised Chapter 6 from our website, www.smtcmpo.org. We welcome your feedback on the draft amendment. Please be sure to submit your comments by November 30th. Comments must be submitted in writing, either via email to contactus@smtcmpo.org or via postal mail to the address shown. The SMTC Policy Committee is expected to adopt the LRTP amendment in early 2022. Thanks for listening.